feel like you and Chris have become very trusted mission control, or is that what you call it? When command central?
Ground control to Major Tom. Is that that's a song?
Yeah, ground control to Major Tom.
I just want to let you know, for some reason, my mute and unmute is like stuck, and I've been having the wackiest tech problems in my first meeting. So,
my goodness.
In case of emergency.
Got it.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Just keep that button. Even keep yourself off. Are you off mute right now?
Now, but it just took me 5 minutes to get off. And
well, just stay off mute then and be quiet.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Just stay off mute because you're up really early in the agenda. So
yeah. Yep. So just so you know, I'm going to do that. But
okay.
Okay, her slides didn't play nice with our template, so I'm just going to close one PowerPoint and open another when it's time for Danielle.
That's fine.
Yeah, I know. I just like to not have to do that if I can avoid it, but we'll be fine.
I can hear you. Erin, lovely hair day.
Thank you.
I said the same thing.
I decided, I'm gonna spruce myself up. At home.
Yeah, well, I can't believe how fast your hair grows. I feel like it was just so, I feel like it was just yesterday that it looked so short, and now it's like
thick and long, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, we're getting a haircut tonight, though, so very excited.
Yeah.
So, Chris, we are on YouTube. Is that right? No answer from Chris. He might be chatting at me. Oh, okay.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Camille. Welcome.
Hey, Wendy.
Sorry about that. I'm not trying to be on camera. Hi.
Hi, Camille.
All right, I'm going to go off camera.
Good morning, Jane.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. It's Thursday. I don't know how that happened. Change my view here.
Good morning, Cheryl. Thanks for joining us.
Emily, happy to be here.
Yeah, we'll sort of go down we always have a few newbies every time we do one of these meetings. So I'll kind of go through the general gist right at the top.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. Good morning, folks. We will give it a couple of minutes as folks are logging on, and I'm watching the chat here. We will get started in just a minute. Folks, if you are here as a surrogate for your administrator or your secretary or top administrator, could you just introduce yourself in the chat so that kind of get a sense of who's representing today? All right, it's lovely to see so many of you on the screen this morning. Really appreciate everybody's willingness to take a few minutes out of your day for opportunity to kind of connect the dots around kids and families. And I want to start today. I see folks joining us, and I was gonna go around and sort of do a quick roundup of agencies, but I think we've got a pretty good sense actually from the participant list. We have many folks who have joined us several times. If this is your first meeting, welcome, and really appreciate you being here. This is really our opportunity to come together again as cabinet agencies and as other agencies in state government that have a vested interest in connecting dots around kids and families. This is our opportunity to do that. And I think as just to kick off, I want to really celebrate and recognize through that email that I sent out on Monday. Sorry, just got the recording email or the recording message. Good reminder for all of us. This is being broadcast live on YouTube. But I sent out an email, a really exciting email that we worked up over the holidays to send out to you, recognizing so much of the good work that we have done together over the last year. And I really want to give credit to this body, this sort of convening for kickstarting and becoming that sort of germinating seed that allows ideas to take off. So many of the conversations that we have started here in Leadership Council on Early Years have given us that sort of seed of thought that has launched grant programs, has really sent us off in new directions, has forged new partnerships, and so really want to give credit to this group and really my profound thanks that you keep attending these meetings. Really appreciate that. We do have a rather full agenda, but before I get too far into it, I'd like to make sure that we do approve those draft minutes from our September 30th meeting. So I'd love to get a motion to approve those minutes, please.
So moved.
I'll move, Peter Barca.
Kevin
Great.
Carr seconds.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. So I'll ask any opposed. Okay, that motion passes. So we'll approve those minutes. Appreciate that. Thank you. So again, very excited to share those accomplishments and the recognition that this is not when we do these meetings, this isn't just an opportunity for the Department of Children and Families to talk to you about the work that we're doing. I really want to continue to recognize and honor the fact that there are so many folks in agencies across state government that are doing this connected work, lifting up children and families, looking for those opportunities to connect. And so we really want to keep that as sort of a central component of what we're thinking about as we think about harnessing the capacity of Leadership Council on Early Years in 2022. Obviously, anytime we get together as a group, I think, oh my gosh, all of these folks are all here to talk about kids and families. And I think that's a really powerful message for this administration to have this kind of commitment. I think that obviously 2021 was a year that brought us just significant conversation, I would say sort of life-changing for a lot of people, conversation about childcare. Whether you are working as a provider, whether you are a parent trying to make all of the pieces move together, puzzle pieces fit together, whether you are an employer who's looking to staff up and really experiencing difficulty because of the lack of childcare, and frankly, for us women in the workforce, I'm finding it really inspiring and freeing to be able to have a conversation about something that so many of us felt was on our shoulders and our shoulders alone for so many years. And I think just even in the last 24 hours to have seen a very, a lot of different takes on whether childcare is something we ought to be thinking about as a society or not. It's still apparently up for debate, but I got to tell you, in places around the state that I travel, and I know many of you are having the same experience, you cannot go anywhere without having a conversation about childcare, about childcare as infrastructure, and about childcare as part of the road we need to walk on the road to economic recovery. So thinking about that, we want to really center some of the greatest hits from 2021, and also some of the new and emerging and exciting things on the horizon out of the Division for Early Care and Education. And so I want to welcome back my friend and colleague, Erin Arango Escalante, who is going to spend some time talking about some of the opportunities that we've been able to capitalize on, both with the federal relief funds, with preschool development grants, latest and upcoming work. And then really, I think the theme of the day for us is how can we stay, stay connected, collaborative, innovative, and equity focused. And so those are kind of the themes of the day that we'll keep hitting on. So we will go ahead and take roll out of the participant list just so that we can stay on time. So Jane, if you can help us make sure that we've got that accurate, we will launch in and invite Erin to kick us off. Thanks, Erin.
All right, thank you, everybody. Good morning. It is so exciting to be here. We are going to pop right into now our current landscape. So we're going to go to the next slide. All right, and we'll go to the next slide as well. So as Secretary Amundsen said, there are themes that you are going to see throughout the presentations today, and they're exciting ones. They're ones that this administration has been focused on really from day one, being equity focused, evidence-based, and of course, collaborative and innovative by connecting the dots. And so I want you to think about these themes as we talk through presentations, we talk through various programs that are happening, and really how we're going to push this as a council to the next level. So on the next slide, I want to just share a little bit about the pathway we have taken to transforming our early childhood systems across our state. And just to bring you back, in 2019, we submitted a preschool development grant, a one-year grant for $10 million. And in fact, we were awarded that at the end of 2019 to really kick off in 2020. It was a $10 million one-year grant. And in that grant, we established this council, the Leadership Council on Early Years. We did a number of listening sessions. We did a needs assessment as well as a strategic plan. And your feedback during that time, although it was early on, it was really, really key in how we created our strategic plan and where we focused on. So then in 2021, we were awarded a 3-year, $30 million grant. And it had a number of components to it. But really the focus was making our strategic plan come to life. Really making it come to life and seeing how we are going to connect the dots across our early care and education system, but beyond. And that's the key here, is the collaborating and partnering with our typically unusual allies, oftentimes many programs that you all represent. And so what we did is our strategic plan, as we were developing it in 2020, really became our framework for then our COVID relief dollars. We know we needed to stay focused, stay directed, stay equity centered, really thinking about those evidence-based practices, thinking about children and families as the core, but also the community and the systems in which they exist. And so now, here we are, we're looking out at 2022 and beyond, and really getting ourselves organized for our next strategic plan that really aligns then with our biennial budget, that aligns with the direction we're headed, knowing what's happening in our current landscape, knowing that COVID has been, yes, very difficult, but also has been a silver lining for early care and education, in terms of funding and in terms of the presence that it has now within our state. So on the next slide, you're going to see the framework. I always start with this framework. It's very, very important. It centers where we are headed. It's our roadmap. And it is truly focusing on increasing access to high quality and affordable early care and education opportunities for Wisconsin's children and families. And in fact, we want, and we have decided we need to turn the dial on access for families across our communities. We know that we have childcare deserts in about 50% of our zip codes. We know that childcare is expensive. We hear it all over the news, and it's not expensive because providers are cranking up the price. It's expensive. The true cost of care is expensive, and we need parents to be able to afford it. Quality, high quality programming, extremely important. And at the core is our workforce. That's who holds all of this together. And we know our workforce is on average making, between $10 and $13 an hour. They are significantly underpaid for doing what I argue one of the most important jobs. And all of this is to promote and advance equity and inclusion across our state. So when we think about this framework, it is the core of everything we're doing. And you can see how this framework is really taken to the next level as we think about all of the programs that we have in early care and education, but also our COVID relief dollars. So on the next slide, you'll see those high-level goals that are part of our strategic plan. Again, workforce is really the early care and education workforce is the workforce behind the workforce. And we've talked about that a lot. And so we need to look at compensation and overall support. We've talked about access, affordability, and quality. These are our 4 big goals that we have in our strategic plan. And what's exciting is that you all and the programs that you lead are really a part of this. And we'll talk about what that looks like coming up. So on the next slide, I just want to reiterate that we have done an initial strategic plan and that you've seen those goals. We are looking to take that next iteration of our needs assessment and strategic plan. And that's something we're working on, that needs assessment now, but also our strategic plan. And we're looking at being very intentional about working with those agencies, DPI, DCF, DHS, that have those kind of big P early care and education programs, but we know that every agency touches this work. It truly, truly does. It's interesting how when we connect the dots and we see the connections between economic development, housing, health services, even tourism. I can go on and on and on about how all of these pieces are connected, and you can see it play out in the bigger picture. So on the next slide, again, our partners in our strategic plan with the big P programs, such as Birth to 3, early childhood special ed, 4-year-old kindergarten, 3-year-old kindergarten, childcare, home visiting. I could keep going and going and going. Head Start, there's a lot of them. So just want to make sure you know those are the core program areas, but the work that we do really across the state really touches all of these key programs. All right. So here's where I want to talk about the approach that we have, and this is really that collaborative and innovative space that we're focusing on. We have a multi-tier systems approach when we think about the work that we are doing within the strategic plan and beyond. So thinking about, again, that strategic plan is our roadmap for then our everything that we do, including our significant COVID relief funding that we have. At the center are our families. Our families are key. And in fact, what we've been able to do is increase our Wisconsin Shares child care subsidy to the 80th percentile. Now, for context here, we are at about the 30th percentile. That means that the amount that families receive for child care subsidy has really gone up and more reflective of the true cost of care. So families are able to afford, have lower co-pays, and then that in turn gets the money directly to our child care providers. So that's one thing. We're supporting affordability for our families. In addition, when we focus on families, we're going to talk about this in greater detail, is having the family voice front and center when we think about policy, when we think about programming, when we think about all of the things that are wrapped up. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Next for our families are our early care and education providers. Thick line to the families. They are on the front line working day in, day out with our families. And we've been able to then look at funding to support those programs. There's been a number of funding opportunities, and we'll talk about those in a second. But the big one is our child care counts, where we've been able to disseminate hundreds of millions of dollars directly to child care providers to really focus on increasing access to high quality care and supporting the workforce. And as you will see, there is a direct connection to that strategic plan and framework. And then last but not least are our communities in Wisconsin. And this is really something that you all helped to connect the dots on. And we've been able to develop Project Growth. And we'll go into detail on Project Growth and what that is, but this is really that connection between employers and childcare community, and really thinking about intentionally connecting those dots to really address our stability issue in childcare as well as our workforce. So in the next slide, I'm going to touch first on that family, that entering. So in addition to increasing our Wisconsin Shares rates to the 80th percentile, we have created, we're in the process of creating our Parent and Caregiver Equity Advisory Cabinet. Now I'm going to bring us back to February of 2021, which is about a year ago. And we all were in a presentation with Dr. Sherry Killing-Stewart, who came from the BUILD Initiative. And we talked a lot about the importance of really having families be part of have a voice at the table. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see we talked a lot about, this is actually Dr. Sherry Killing-Stewart's slides, talked a lot about using both qualitative and quantitative data to understand the communities that have historically been marginalized, those particular populations, and how do you lift their voices, that beneficiary voice, those voices that have lived experiences, and bring those voices to really help look at equity in our system. look at equity across policies, across systems. And so what we did is we looked at the data. We took that next step, and you are all part of this next step, in looking at which communities really have that at least in either investment or infrastructure to do business with Wisconsin, with the state. Which communities may not have access to benefits or are not as connected to the benefits that we provide. And so based on that, and based on digging into the data and understanding it, we formed, I should say in the process of forming, a parent and caregiver equity advisory cabinet. This is really exciting. Conceptually, if you go to the next slide, we've been able to really drill down in the data, talk with stakeholders, talk with community partners, talk with families, and say, based on all of these and triangulating the data, that we want to focus, and communities are eager for us to focus in Beloit, in Adams County, in Le Coudray. So we have a tribal community, a rural community, and an urban community. And so this is the starting point. This is the starting place for us to really think about how within these communities that have historically may not have had a seat at the table, how we're going to bring that voice to the table. And the next slide, again, Dr. Sherry Stewart-Killings talked a lot about beneficiary voice and those feedback loops. So the purpose of this cabinet is really to understand, what are our family needs for their children, for themselves as families? What are the experiences? And how have they experienced racial inequities and disparities? And we want to apply the lessons that have learned to the policies and the programs that we are developing. We want intentional feedbacks, and we want it early on from the ideation and conceptualization phase. We want to be able to have those feedback loops in the design process and to look at continuous quality improvement over time. We want families, again, from these communities, from folks who haven't had a seat at the table, to really have a seat at this table. And so this is our first step. I'm not going to say it's perfect. We are going to be learning over time, and that's okay. We're learning and really developing these trusting relationships and opportunities to hear from those with lived experience. So another piece on the next slide, we actually have an application process. We have an application that is available in English and in Spanish, and we can also talk through this application with folks as well. And again, the goal is to make sure that we are connecting, we are listening. This information is informing the work that we do, and we're acting on it. And so here is a link to the application. Our application actually closes this coming Sunday on the 30th. Right now we have a number of applications that have been submitted, and we're looking for more. And so we're happy to share this information with you. Again, there's a link on the slide that we will send to you. But again, looking for parents and caregivers. So those non-traditional parents, perhaps they are a grandparent as the guardian, perhaps they are providing kinship care, a foster parent. But really looking at all of our opportunities for engagement in this.
Erin, can I jump in and just ask a question that I know I've received on this application? I know that we've targeted 3 communities. So again, Beloit and Adams County and Le Coudray. If folks had interested parties from outside of those 3 communities, should they encourage them to apply?
Yes, yeah. This is our starting point. Our starting point is focusing on these 3 communities. That's not to say it's the end point. And so we're heavily recruiting in those communities, knowing that we can apply lessons learned across various communities. And so absolutely, we encourage all parents and caregivers to apply. Yes, but again, just focusing with the data, with the intentionality in those 3 communities to begin with. All right. So yeah, we'll definitely be circling back to this as it does really drive the work that we are doing. On the next slide, I just want to make a quick connection here. I see our Parent and Caregiver Equity Advisory Cabinet continuing to inform our relief dollars that are going out and connecting to what are the needs of families and how are we designing policies and programs that align to those needs. So that's a really key aspect. In addition, you'll see that the strategic plan really comes to life when you see how we have used these dollars over time. And so we've had really these three larger buckets of funding, as many have here. The CARES Act, our Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or CRSA, and then our American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. And so I'm going to just give you a brief overview of what this looks like in terms of how the dollars have been allocated. So on the next slide, you will see that. The green, CARES Act, the red is CRSA, and then finally ARPA. So as you can see from the get-go, early on, we've developed child care counts. It has been a mechanism to do two things: to increase access to high quality care and to support the workforce, again, aligned to our strategic plan. We have carried that through since early on in spring 2020. It has been carried through, and it continues today with our ARPA dollars. You can see there's been other supports, whether it's a workforce retention and recognition program, shared services network, so wraparound support, and so forth. We've had a lot that have supported then our community. Right now, we are in the process of working with our Joint Committee in Finance on our supplemental discretionary grant for ARPA. Again, continuing child care counts, and that's really key. And I want to go into child care counts and really the impact and what it has done for our early care and education field. So on the next slide, you are going to see some data here, and then I'm going to go into a couple stories. So early on, as I mentioned, we were able to push out roughly $51 million to over 2,700 childcare providers across the state. This includes family childcare, group childcare. It's so certified and licensed. It's school age work. It is wide reach. And really, we helped over 20,000 childcare workers stay employed, and over 80,000 children continue to have that continuity of high quality care. We received a lot of good feedback, and there was also some tweaks that needed to be made as well when we created then the next program, which was in fall of 2020. And at this point, we delivered roughly $80 million to almost 2,900 childcare providers. Again, we were keeping our providers in business. We were able to look at increasing wages, looking at compensation as a whole, and really continuing to have care across the state that meets the unique needs of our families. That was really key. When you look at other states, they had a significant decrease in their childcare availability across their states. Wisconsin looked different. Did we lose childcare providers, and did we have to close classrooms at times? Yes. That is absolutely a thing. However, we were also able to decrease that and to look at the net outcome, and found that we were able to stabilize with these additional dollars. So that was something that was really key as well. And childcare providers needed these dollars to stay afloat. They needed this to provide tuition relief for families. So you can begin to see how these dollars impacted the provider and the family as well. On the next slide, as I mentioned, we continued childcare counts. And we continued it into the spring of 2021, where we saw an increase in people needing these dollars. And now 3,200 childcare providers applied with $106 million. This helped recruit and retain their workforce. And it helped to continue providing high quality care to almost 100,000 children. So now I'm going to fast forward us. Again, these dollars have been incredibly important. We are now providing monthly payments for the next 18 months to child care providers. This is really, really important. We needed a system, and this is using our ARPA dollars, a system where providers knew exactly what they were going to get month by month, and it's based on their number of staff and their number of children. And they can predict, they can budget for, they can forecast, and it's been incredibly important. It's been their lifeline. These dollars have been the lifeline, and now they're able to focus on really increasing quality. They're able to focus on potentially expansion and really supporting their own staff so that they can really increase compensation, provide benefits to retain a high qualified workforce. So that's where we are at now. It's been a powerful program. I want to share with you just some stories that have come in. This picture always makes me smile. You know, one of the things that as a parent, you may remember if your children in childcare and bringing back and forth snowsuits and not having like mittens and boots for your child on a day was detrimental, especially now with COVID and getting kids outside and having the ability to have this gear for children who may not have it and have those experiences outside has just been incredible. So with a portion of their funds, this provider purchased snow gear for families and for the children. And to see these smiling faces outside on a playground or on a walk, really exploring nature, has just been incredible. There's another story that has come to mind from a family childcare provider in Waukesha. And this is just an email that we received that really talks about helping families with the cost of childcare. There are families that do owe money because of a workforce situation or what have you, or other expenses that come up that families have to make really important decisions on. And so they were able to cover back pay or going forward family tuition for families that may not quite qualify for Wisconsin shares. And it's supporting their kindergarten readiness. It is supporting their overall growth and development, K-12 and beyond. And that's just something that's critically important. As we know, the investment in early care and education, the return on investment is unlike no other. And so they were able to order wooden toys, blocks, and they invested in more indoor gross motor. And eventually they're going to look into additional outdoor space. And I mean, this is so important. They have addressed everything in our strategic plan from a family child care perspective. They've been able to help families and affordability. They're looking at access. They're looking at quality and supporting themselves in the workforce, and really to advance and promote equity and inclusion across our state. And this is just one example. I can't tell you how many examples like this we hear about every single day. And so you see the direct connection between our strategic plan, our funding, and then the impact on providers, on communities, and on families. On our next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about now the community aspect. Now, Project Growth is something that really stemmed from conversations that we've had as a leadership council in early years. This is really the impetus. And we had these conversations pretty early on in thinking about how are we intentionally connecting the dots for businesses and employers, for families, for the workforce at large, and for childcare. And so on the next slide, you'll see we really wanted to rise to the challenge. We knew that our working families needed really high quality childcare. And we knew that childcare was an issue from employers. In order to recruit and retain a workforce, childcare was needed. And we knew a lot of families couldn't afford it. We also know that oftentimes our childcare programs weren't able to charge the true cost of care. They had to really subsidize care. And we knew communities had a hard time maintaining and recruiting. So maintaining the workers that we had and recruiting for new employees. And so this was a challenge that we talked about pretty extensively. And I think we all are experiencing it across the different agencies. And so on the next slide, we really talked about this community approach to affordable childcare. We wanted to reduce and really share the costs of high quality childcare that meets the unique needs of our families. We wanted to keep our parents working while their children are safe, they're learning, they're growing, they're in high quality programs. And this will allow us to then sustain a strong workforce, looking at our economy at large, and really generating that economic well-being for our businesses and our communities. And so this is something that, again, we talked about, we really pushed and pulled and thought through how this would really have a strong impact on really diversity, equity, and inclusion in our state. And so on the next slide, you can see really where we landed. We looked at 2 funding sources, and we created Project Growth, created 2 programs. The first one is our Dream Up grant, and we are hearing this across so many communities that they're involved in really focusing on innovation and growth and focusing on the community level strategic planning to increase supply building and collaboration across all of the sectors that are here today, whether it's businesses, childcare providers, our 4K-12, so our local education agencies, our nonprofit, for-profit, you name it. But we're looking at community level strategic planning and supply building and collaboration. So that's the first piece of this. That was something that we heard from conversations with you. We've heard with communities, stakeholders, families, businesses. There's a need. And we are using our preschool development grant to fund that section of Project Growth, our Dream Up grant. In addition, we have heard a lot about what we're referring to as our Partner Up grant and the need here. And this is really building our public-private partnerships by having businesses, employers contract for slots in local, currently regulated childcare programs at the true cost of care. So programs can then contract and purchase slots within the already regulated existing programs for a period of time. And this is going to then stabilize some of diversify our revenue for our childcare programs, and in turn, really look at stability for the employers as well. So we're focusing on our essential workforce, which we defined in the governor's executive order early on, but really focusing on those sectors that are providing those essential services right now. So that will be our focus area. But these 2 grant opportunities will be coming out very soon. We will keep you in the loop. We are asking for your support in communicating with your stakeholders. We want to go big here. There's money, there's the time that we have to make these investments. And we believe that these investments will also, help connect the dots in communities, but really move the needle in access, affordability, quality, and workforce to advance and promote equity and inclusion in our state. And so on the next slide, you will see then the website, and we will make sure you have all of this information. But again, I can't reiterate the thank you to you all for your help in the design process in Project Growth. This came out of the Leadership Council on Early Years, these ideas. And so I just want to thank you for your ongoing support and work in the space to connect the dots, and just again asking you for your continued support in disseminating this information and communicating it to your.
Erin, can I just add one or two thoughts on Project Growth? So, Erin's exactly right. I think so many of the conversations that we had at this table and that we had interagency around some of the contacts that you've received from your natural partners in the childcare sphere were what really born these two programs. And in just a minute, we'll hear from Danielle Williams from DWD on the Workforce Innovation Grant program, which in my mind is sort of a nice for the awardees that are focused specifically on issues surrounding childcare in their communities. The Dream Up grant program is almost like a nice additional capacity builder for those types of projects, or potentially for unfunded projects in those spaces. As you could see, if you did have the ability to go back to the last slide, you can see that the one limitation on most of the funding that comes out of DCF is our inability to use grant funding for capital improvements and expenditures. And so that's a real limiting factor, I think. But I think that idea of community strategic planning, of potentially those entities that may have applied for workforce innovation grant funding but maybe weren't quite there. I could imagine those programs applying for Dream Up grants to continue to sort of workshop their ideas and sort of coalesce in a greater way. So just really kind of calling on folks who have had those types of conversations. I think Dream Up would be a really nice nice opportunity there. Missy, I think you might need to mute. And then on the partner up side, I have to be really honest. I feel like so many of you in this Zoom room have reached out to me and said like, hey, I got this great call from a business leader who's really interested in solving through childcare. And generally, when we pick up and follow on those calls, they are interested in doing something similar to what Erin is talking about with the Partner Up grant. They're interested in this idea of how do we make sure that when we're making those recruitment calls, when we're trying to attract that wonderful, hot new employee with all of the skills from, X, Y, or Z place, that we can tell them, if you come here, we have childcare already lined up for you. That's always something that we're hearing about from business leaders, is that stands in the way of recruiting and retaining high quality talent. And, those stories are sort of around, have been told almost like folklore in the state of Wisconsin about when we lose out on really high quality talented candidates. We need your help pushing businesses toward this program. I'm already seeing on the childcare side, somebody just sent me a communication that they received from their childcare provider last night, saying, hey, if you work at a business that's at all interested in this, help us, hook us up. We're interested in exploring this. But I'm gonna flag early on that I think the provider community is gonna need the help of the folks in this room to help make those connections and make those right matches between businesses who are interested in trying something in this space and high quality providers in the area. So just want to double down on that point. Erin, I'm sorry, are you going back into slides, or are you, that was it?
That was a perfect transition. So thank you.
Perfect. And so I want to ask, thank you, Erin. You're always, you do such a great job of keeping us so focused on that, on that strategic plan, on that North Star. I'm wondering if any folks have any questions for Erin. Peter, yeah, go for it.
Oh, wonderful presentation. First of all, thank you so much, Erin. I really feel like I learned a tremendous amount about, so much of the progress that's been made here. One quick question though is, I'm curious in terms of outcomes on pay for childcare workers. Obviously, you've got a number of very positive, bold initiatives, but where are we at now? Have we been able to move the needle where they were averaging $12 an hour and now they're getting $14 an hour? Or do we have data like that you could share? Because I know, when I go around the state, the whole issue of workforce is the biggest issue that comes up. And so I think your initiatives are very, very helpful, I'm sure. But curious about that.
Yeah, here's what I will say. We are right now in the process of our second month of our monthly childcare accounts payments for the next 18 months. I will be really honest. A couple of things that we're seeing. We are seeing in pockets, we are seeing an increase in wage up to roughly about $3 an hour. So that's one, and it's in pockets. So that's the first thing that I'm hearing a lot about. And it's kind of the magic number is up to $3 an hour. That's one. Two, we are also hearing that people are trying to figure out the mechanism in which to do this. So when you see an increase, there's fear, to be honest with you. There's fear in sustainability. So we know 18 months, we're actually looking at 27 months total for these increased payments, but there's a reluctancy. And so we are working, really providing technical assistance with providers to explain how to do this and how to then diversify your revenue with, for example, Partner Up, so that sustainability is there and they can keep it higher. So we are also seeing, though, investments in on bonus, like sign-on bonuses. So they're recruiting, because obviously, we had classrooms that have closed because there just aren't the staff. So those sign-on bonuses people are using, and that's been attractive. And then other compensation. So free childcare has been a perk that people are using, and other like compensation, like freebies and in discounts on things. We are going to be doing a very strong intentional communication campaign around the workforce and how you do this. And I think that diversification of revenue and funding coming in is going to be key, so people begin to see it. We also want to share those success stories. So if you hear of a provider who is able to do this, I would love to know, so we can begin to highlight and share those lessons learned. But I will say, people are pushing on this space because they know that's really the ticket. I mean, we're hearing this all over, and some have successfully done it. And when they do it, oftentimes we hear from the teacher who had that increase in salary and are like over the moon. Like, I get almost emotional when you hear about the impact on the family. So we'll keep you posted, everybody posted, on the data that we can begin to extrapolate from these additional, these additional funds going out. But I'll be honest, it's the lifeline right now for the field. It truly is.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And Peter, I mean, I think we're really, Erin, two payments into our monthly payment structure around childcare counts. And so I think that the real game changer from my perspective is going from these one-time payments that people were really reticent to raise wages because they didn't know the next time they were going to see another payment. Now you can set your clock by it. And as Erin said, we have guaranteed 18 months. We're asking JFC for permission to extend that to 27 months. And I think that would be the assurance I think that providers need, and that the boards of these childcare centers need to be able to apply that sort of across the board wage increase that I think is going to make a real difference. And then we are very interested in that data. So thanks for the question. Any other questions? Yeah. I will flag that the one place, and Erin has heard me say this before, the one place that is really, really difficult for us to sort of conceive of a strategy, but it's one that we've heard all the time, and I'll just put it out there, and I know that Jill Underly is definitely on this wavelength as well, but it's really around the benefits package for the childcare workforce, and I think that is something we just consistently hear is a challenge. It's something that we want to keep watching as other states, if other states can find any success in kind of forging those new paths, but also would love anybody's collaborative headspace and all of your genius around benefits packages, because that is a real impediment to keeping people in this workforce. All right. Well, thank you so much, Erin. Really appreciate that. And I think this is a really great, perfect segue into what Danielle Williams has joined us to talk a little bit about. So as all of you know, DWD and WEDC launched a really exciting program that has so many impacts on communities across Wisconsin. In the form of the Workforce Innovation Grant Program. There are folks working on big picture community issues in cross-sector ways that we're just really excited about it. There are a number of roundtables over the next couple of weeks that will really help us dig further into what does it take for a community to have these types of conversations and to get to this kind of theory of action. Of course, we're even more thrilled in the early care and education sector to see 3 of the successful grant program fundees really playing in that child care space and asking those questions about child and family sustainability in communities. And so we asked Danielle to just talk a little bit about those 3 awardees and their sort of theory of action as we sort of lean in and listen and learn from them as they go through this process. So Danielle, what do we know?
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me here today. And it's really actually extra exciting and time sensitive to be here to talk about this issue as we're celebrating with Governor Evers on Wisconsin's record low unemployment rate. You may have heard that we had 2.8%, which is very historic, nationally recognized right now. So it's really exciting time. And while Wisconsin continues to have some of the nation's highest labor force participation levels, these current numbers also, though, do point to that critical role of quality childcare in that labor market equation. So as all of you know, and as Secretary Amundson and Erin have already discussed this morning, that lack of quality, affordable childcare represents a barrier to some who would otherwise enter the labor force or acquire additional in-demand skills. And so that's why Governor Evers' groundbreaking investment in workforce solutions, which includes support for our childcare workforce, is so important. It's an investment in both our Wisconsin businesses and our communities. So under the Workforce Innovation Grant Program, the Department of Workforce Development, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, and the Department of Administration have combined forces in their expertise to offer up to $100 million in grant funding to regional collaborations that are connecting the dots to develop workforce solutions through innovative thinking, data-driven planning, and leveraging existing infrastructures. And I will say that while these 3 agencies are sort of leading the effort, I do want to thank all of our sister agencies, including DCF, who also provided their input throughout the development of the grant program, so we could be as comprehensive as possible when we considered how we can best address the workforce challenges facing the state. So ultimately, the purpose of this grant program is to help all Wisconsin workers connect to better, higher quality, family-sustaining jobs, and to make sure that employers have the skilled workers in place so that their businesses may thrive. But of course, while we are facing statewide workforce challenges, individual employers and their communities also have unique issues that require very tailored solutions. I mean, it's just common sense that some of the challenges preventing employers in Southeast Wisconsin from hiring might not be exactly the same issues facing someone in the Northwest. So the Innovation Grant Program gives communities and industries the flexibility to respond to their specific regional workforce needs and develop those solutions that will work best for them. So one community may use the grant to support access to affordable childcare, while another uses it for transportation infrastructure or worker attraction and retention, housing, you name it. They also allow the communities to really target the issues of inequity most challenging their communities. The grant specifically calls out for applicants to demonstrate how their project will address the historically underserved populations in their region. So we did end up receiving about 120 applications during the first round. So it was a very competitive process. We were completely blown away by the thought that went into these projects. It was just very clear that the communities did come together, consider what their needs were and how they would work to achieve them. And so obviously when you have that many applications, the request came in well above the $100 million mark. And we did commit to funding this program through 2 rounds. So reviewing these applications was incredibly difficult. Ultimately, Governor Evers announced that 12 projects would be funded through this first round when they came in around $60 million. Among the projects that were funded were public-private partnerships to train and attract healthcare workers throughout rural Wisconsin, develop next-generation advanced manufacturing employees in West Central and Southeast Wisconsin, create pipelines of young educated workers in Milwaukee, for training in construction and skilled craft workers throughout the state, fostering a culture of entrepreneurship in Kenosha, and allowing incarcerated individuals to earn undergraduate degrees from the University of Wisconsin. And then, of most interest to all of you, we also selected 3 projects that aim to expand affordable, high-quality childcare in Door County, Greene County, and South Central Wisconsin, which I'll highlight a little bit more today. And as you can see in the next slide, the first project is being led by the United Way of Door County, and they partnered with 2 local nonprofit child care centers, the Door County Housing Partnership, the Door County Economic Development Corporation, as well as a few other county agencies. And their project focused on the idea that you all will appreciate, that the child care workforce supports their entire county's workforce. And so they recognize that employees in every industry rely on some form of childcare, and that childcare enables families to earn a living and contributes to Door County's operational and economic success. So United Way of Door County took several steps to identify this workforce issue in their region. Leaders organized a community childcare task force, which was composed of parents, businesses, community members, local government staff, nonprofit partners, and county board members. They then conducted online community surveys to learn about the needs of families across the county. And they met with childcare experts from across the state and beyond to learn about solutions being explored in other communities. Then they held bi-weekly online community town hall meetings to educate individuals about the childcare system and hear from parents and the business community about their personal experiences and to hear their ideas on how to improve the system. Then, based on their group's findings, they realized that they really did need to develop new business models that require additional support for the childcare workforce through training, mentoring, and succession planning that would then allow them to serve more families and adapt and evolve their services to reflect Door County's changing demographics and business makeup. And so what this means is really they were looking at, how many second shift, third shift workers there are, and very limited service providers for those working parents. So ultimately, this group will use $3.5 million in workforce innovation grant funding to support the construction of new and existing childcare facilities for 2 local nonprofit licensed group childcare centers that will be accommodating this new business model. Then the next project on the next slide will be a partnership between the Madison Area Technical College, 4C, Greater Watertown Community Health Foundation, Reach Dane, the Wisconsin Early Childhood Association, the Latino Academy of Workforce Development, and the Workforce Development Board of South Central Wisconsin. This group actually identified 2 significant pandemic-related workforce issues in South Central Wisconsin: childcare and related training, and then upskilling for in-demand jobs. Both issues directly impact working families within the South Central region, and specifically low-income families and communities of color who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Madison College will use its experience to provide appropriate supportive services to serve low-income students and students of color. And then through multifaceted improvements to childcare infrastructure and new avenues for them to access training in high-demand areas, the project will provide individuals, and with a very special emphasis on working families, with the educational resources for them and their children, so that the intent is that it would pay dividends for generations. Their solution is to bolster the pipeline of high-quality childcare professions by leveraging Madison College's experience and partnerships. Their project will support working families with dedicated navigational support at the college level and develop access to in-demand skills training in advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and IT through various partnerships with community-based organizations, employers, and then other technical colleges. And so this project is receiving about $2.9 million. And finally, the last project I just wanted to highlight this morning is being led by the Greene County Family YMCA and its partnership with Big Brothers Big Sisters, Vitality Youth Services, Jacob Swag, Avenues Counseling, and the local multicultural outreach program. So this group identified that Greene County's shortage of accessible daycare facilities and their youth development infrastructure left many parents with no other option than to stay at home or work reduced hours to care for their children when they otherwise would be a part of the workforce. They recognized that COVID exacerbated this problem for parents of teenagers with the closing of public schools, libraries, and other common hangout spots that are safe for youth. So through $3.7 million in grant funds, their grant will be facilitating the addition of a 5,000 square foot state-of-the-art daycare center and a preschool wing for licensed programs and classes. They will also build a 6,000 square foot youth development wing. And their intent is that through these facilities, they will create a safe space for youth of all abilities and backgrounds to learn valuable life skills, attend workshops, improve mental health, and quote, unapologetically be themselves. I just love that. So I had to add that in there. So can go to the next slide, but those are the three ideas that were funded in the first round of the Innovation Grant Program. And then this spring, we'll open the program back up for a second round of applications. The application and scoring rubric will be pretty similar to what was released in the first round for those of you who may have taken a look, but there will be a few minor changes to reflect some updated federal guidance. Over the next few months, WEDC and DWD will host webinars to address the common questions from the first round, highlight some of the positive attributes of our selected applicants to help inspire some additional applications. We do, though, strongly encourage groups who were not selected in the first round to perhaps update and resubmit their applications. As mentioned, there were so many wonderful, innovative ideas and plans that were out there that just may not have been as fleshed out as their peers. So we do please ask that you share your networks about this opportunity. From our perspective, even if the groups aren't selected to receive funding through this application, just having industry and community partners come together is making a big difference. We've heard from some that this is the first time that some of these community organizations and employers are coming together. And so they've come up with ideas on how to collaborate even outside the grant program. So that's really exciting. And as Secretary Amundson said, it sounds like there are some other grant applications through Dream Up that might also be appropriate for them to come together about. So just so you all know, we have also made it very clear that all recipients of the grants are responsible for sharing their lessons learned with their counterparts across the state. So we hope that all the grant recipients will serve as models and explain exactly what worked and what also didn't work in addressing workforce challenges, including in trying to target this childcare issue. And we will certainly keep all of you up to date. So that is all I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions or ask Secretary Hughes and Secretary Bahacek to also answer questions as they've gone out and met with a lot of these recipients.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Any questions for Danielle or any comments we'd welcome from either Amy or Missy if there's anything you'd like to add.
Emily, this is Missy. I would only add that, first of all, Danielle, thank you. You did a fantastic job. And can I have the slides? And I would only add that, having had the experience of going to Greene County and helping to announce the governor's award for the Y there, the excitement around this from the whole community, whether it was mental health professionals or the rest of the Y where they have adult fitness and gymnastics, it is a whole community approach that is being taken and will have an impact. So it's just really exciting. I'm looking forward to going back down there for the roundtable.
Awesome. Thank you, Missy. Kathy, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Great job, Danielle and Aaron and Emily, of course. This is just so exciting to see all the energy and all the resources around this. A question, so coincidentally, just yesterday, I got an email from someone that had applied for one of the grants and didn't get them. In terms of sending them information about the second round, do you have something that you can share with us in case we come across these opportunities? And maybe there was some in the handouts as well. But what was the number again for the total pool of applicants versus we did 60 million, is that right?
Yeah, so
And
there's
the total was
there was $100 million available, and we did want to break it up into 2 rounds.
Okay.
So in the first round, we received 120 applications thereabout,
okay.
and then ended up only being able to fund 12 in this first round, which came to $60 million.
Got it.
So there's about 40 left for the second round. And
Very good.
as for where they can go, there is a website, and it is on the last slide, but I can also just shoot it around.
Yeah.
The link on WDC's website is live. Most of the information is going to be very relevant. There might be some minor changes to some questions just to make sure that we're very clear in what we're asking for. But if they're interested, they should take a look there now and start preparing.
Okay, that's great. And I'll also take a copy of those slides. They were wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Danielle, if you want to send slides our way, we can make sure on all of the cleanup stuff that we send out after this meeting, we can make sure to get those out to people. I just want to say, I think that there was a real intentionality in the way that that WEDC and DWD went about constructing this grant program. And I don't want to keep hammering how important I think this table is, but I do think, those of you who have been at this table for a while might remember the presentation that we heard from our friends in Ashland, Mary Kay Novotny and others around, a real community-wide approach to solving through childcare issues. And I think about a presentation like that and an opportunity that we had to connect those dots. And then I think about the real, again, intentionality that I think DWD and WEDC took in terms of approaching other state agencies for counsel and feedback early and often, so that we were able to scoop up so many of these innovative ideas that are cross-sector. So just real kudos to the, not only to the result of this program, but to the way that this program was constructed, and to see a program that so perfectly mirrors some of the blueprint documents coming out of this administration over the past 12 months. I just think it's really phenomenal. So thanks, Danielle, and very much looking forward, and I know many of us are looking forward to some of these roundtables over the coming weeks. So we are a little bit behind, but I do want to honor a quick break. So if we could just take a 5-minute break. My clock says 10:07. That would put us back here right around 10:12. And then we'll launch into our next segment, again, sort of bringing another facet of this lens around kids and families to the table. So see you all back in 5. All right, folks, in an effort to just keep us moving along here, I'll go ahead and introduce our next topic. I want to appreciate in our first hour that real concrete focus on childcare and the childcare sector. And I think that one of the interesting nuances to the conversation over the last year has been our ability to take a conversation about childcare, which has always been, I think, in a lot of ways, very child focused, and really broaden that conversation to bring the voices of families and employers and community to the table in both how we think about childcare and how we think about solving through it. And I think in general terms, when we lift the focus off the children and we put the focus on family. What does it take for family to be strong and well together? What does it take for family to be healthy and thriving? I think that is a direction that it feels like we are all headed in creating and knitting those strong fibers of support in communities across Wisconsin. And I want to call on the presentations we heard last time we were together, both from Rebecca Murray and from Linda Hall, around knitting that fabric. What does it look like when we're supporting and resourcing family resource centers? What does it mean to be socially connected in your family unit, in your community? And I think in service to that, we thought it would be helpful to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about our efforts to bring that focus on family to our child welfare system. So child welfare has historically been focused on what does it take to keep kids safe, free of abuse, free of neglect. And the intervention often applied in those situations when a child is found to be not safe is to remove that child from their home, from their family unit. And I think that what this sector has been doing over the past several years is really examining what are the consequences, intended and unintended, that happen when we make a decision like that. That's a huge decision, and to pretend that does not have a huge impact on kids and families when that decision is made is just not something that we can do any longer. And so, in service to a vision that is very much about how do we strengthen family, how do we strengthen community so that every child has that safe, loving home environment and that families can care for their children. The child welfare units across the state of Wisconsin are working hard on a transformation to really make that vision a reality. And so today, Division Administrator Wendy Henderson from the Division of Safety and Permanence at DCF is here to talk just a little bit about that piece of the puzzle in helping, again, to keep kids and families strong in community together. And I think so much of what we've talked about, whether it's childcare, whether it's family resource centers, other community groups, are pieces of that puzzle. And so, Wendy, I want to invite you to spend a little bit of time on our child welfare transformation.
Thanks so much. And as I get started, I just want to say that the conversation that's happening nationally really resonates both personally and professionally. So we've been really talking about how do we give families that advantage and how do we connect them to that care? And I think back to, I started at the department when my daughter was 9 months old, so I can always easily measure my time at the department. I've been here for, about 12 and a half years. And so when I started, I remember that scramble of making sure that my daughter was cared for so that I could come here and do the work that I needed to do. And so just want to appreciate this group from the outset as we start thinking about the importance of childcare for us personally, and then also, of course, for the families that we serve. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hit on these different themes today. I know that we talked about this at the outset. I will say that at the center of our child welfare transformation is really thinking about the people who we serve through the child welfare system and a really deep-rooted belief that we cannot make the changes that we want to make and do it to the families that we're working on behalf of. And so this has been such a collaborative process. You'll hear about some of the cool collaborations. You'll hear about how we're changing our thoughts about equity and evidence-based practice. And so excited to sort of highlight these different pieces as we go through today. Next slide. So I think that it's important to sort of root us in where is the child welfare system. And you're going to hear a little bit today about the Family First Prevention Services Act. And when people hear about prevention, they get really excited and they think that we're out there preventing child welfare. And I wish that that was the case. But what we're talking about today and what we're talking about in terms of the child welfare transformation is really that third tier tertiary prevention. This is the cool graphic that can be shared at one of the earlier meetings. And so you can see that this runs the gamut from that very like front end, we're going to prevent anything bad from happening to kids. We're at that tertiary level. And so when a family comes to the attention of child protection, what we're trying to do is change that first instinct as a system. And as Secretary Amundsen said, the first instinct forever has been, we are going to remove the child from that dangerous home. And so the question that we have for you all is, what would it look like to wrap the services and supports around that child to be able to support that kid and that family together? And you'll see throughout this, the theme of childcare being a really critical piece of that. Next slide, please. So many of you may have seen our vision that all Wisconsin children and youth are safe and loved members of thriving families and communities. And for us, that really means that our child welfare transformation is rooted in the deep belief that children belong with their families. And so that's sort of how we've been orienting the work that we're doing. I should mention here that the majority of children that are removed from their homes are in that 0 to 5 population, which is why we're really focused on what's happening during the day with those kids and what other supports can we wrap around them. Because of the level of vulnerability of those young children as a system, when a child comes to us and they're deemed to be unsafe, we really need to figure out what kind of supports we can do to keep those kids safe. And so that's still a group that we see a higher proportion of removals. Next slide, please. So there is a new federal law that's kind of interacting in a cool way with the work that we're doing. The Family First Prevention Services Act was passed in 2018 and has been sort of the backbone of some of the transformative work that we're doing. The legislation itself really just is sort of a change in the funding formula for child welfare. It's not super exciting, but the exciting part about it is that for the first time, the federal government recognized where the field has been going, which is that kids really should be served in their home first. And so the purpose of this Family First Prevention Services Act is to change the funding incentive so that more kids can be served in their home without a child welfare removal. And for context, it used to be that really the only place that we got federal funding was after a child was removed based on that out-of-home care placement. So this really is a historic change in how that funding happens. Now, there's a whole lot of work that we have to do to try to bolster our in-home continuum to make sure that we have the services and supports that are available. So what we're looking at is how can we partner with local communities? We've been doing a lot of information gathering and learning from our county and tribal partners about what do you do? How do you serve kids in home? What would you need? Who are the populations that you're still having a challenge with? And so we're really looking at keeping kids with their parents. When that's not possible, keeping them with their extended family. Wisconsin is really leading the country in that kinship care realm and making sure that kids stay with their families. And then at the same time, thinking about how can we improve our group care system for kids who need to use that system? What kind of supports can we think about for our workforce, partnering really closely with DHS and working closely with DPI to try to make sure that we have the right services and supports, particularly with kids with complex needs who are, really needing those kinds of supports. Next slide, please. One of the things that I'm really most proud of in terms of the work that we've been doing over the past few years is the equity lens that we are bringing to our work. About a year and a half ago, DCF hired our first lived experience coordinator in the Division of Safety and Permanence. And so now we have somebody whose whole job it is to make sure that we are gathering that information from the people most affected by the changes that we're trying to do, and really getting that information not on the back end. So we're not bringing them all of the solutions and saying, hey, what do you think? You know, give us a pat on the back. I think we got this right. But really coming at the front end to really help co-design how can we make things better on behalf of kids and families. We had done better for years on the youth realm, and now we really have a lot more going on the parent realm. I also want to shout out the Office of Children's Mental Health, who has just been an absolute leader in this area. They're working with us collaboratively to have a parent leader group, and have been really providing a ton of backbone support to make sure that that group has what they need to be able to help us in this realm. We have a very active youth advisory council system, both for our child welfare and our youth justice system, and just feeling really good about the aspects of that work that really do lend itself to the work that we're trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. So this is actually a breaking news slide. So some of you may have heard even, you know, as recently as last week or this week about these numbers, and I want to give you a little bit of context. So it's a little bit hard to quantify sometimes how many kids are being served in home. It's a little bit more amorphous than like once a child is removed, you know, we have a lot of information about them. And so what we've been tracking is how many kids are removed per day across the state of Wisconsin. So if you look at all of the removals, all of the children, in 2017, which was at our peak, there were about 15 and a half, not half a child, but we'll call it 15 children that were removed each day. In 2020, that number was 11.8, so about 12. And I'm here to tell you now that in 2021, that number is going to be about 10 and a half. So we've come down 5 children per day. And I just want you to think about that for a second. So everybody on this call has somebody in their life who's important to them. And whether it's your own child, whether it's a niece or a nephew, grandchild, whatever it may be. And I want you to think about the ripple effects from one child being removed from their home. And now I want to magnify that 5 children per day, every day for a whole year. And so this is a big deal, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And this isn't the work that we're doing at DCF. This is the work that's happening on a daily basis as decisions are being made on behalf of kids and families to try to figure out what is the best route. And as Secretary Amundsen said, really figuring out what is the other side of the impact of removing a child, because that's always been what feels like the safest approach. And yet we know that once a child is removed, there is some trauma that's created through that removal. And also then there's a lot of work that needs to be happened to figure out, can this child go home? When is it going to be safe? And all of that stuff. And so what we're seeing, next slide, please, is that first instinct to remove a child has really been what's changed. And you can see that there's a pretty big change here since 2015, and we're still waiting for those 2021 numbers. But this is the removals within 60 days of a child protection report. And the 2015 to 2016 was pretty dramatic, but you can see that from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, you can see the trajectory. And so what that means is that we have workers in the field who are really figuring out, how do I wrap those supports in on behalf of kids and families? One of the biggest challenges that we have here, and something that I would highlight for you all, is our system partners and the expectations. And so I think that one of the things that can be a challenge locally is really trying to understand when somebody picks up the phone, when a mandated reporter calls, they don't always want to hear, we're just going to redouble our efforts with the family, right? They're expecting to hear, oh, we hear you, we hear your concerns. Child protection will remove that child to safety. And so I think that the next tier of work that we have to do is to really talk to the field about what we're doing here, because this transformative work is going to strengthen kids in classrooms. It's going to mean that they have less moves and less disruptions. And we know that every time that a child moves to a new educational setting, they lose about 6 months. So if we can minimize those impacts, I think all of us can get to a better place, but this is a new paradigm, and I think we need to do a better job as a community is getting that information out. Next slide, please. So one of the really best tools that we've been using to try to increase this in-home work is a pretty unrestricted pot of TANF dollars. We call it the Targeted Safety Supports Fund, and that's dollars that we have increased over the past 5 years or so. So it's gone from just under $1 million to over $5 million. And you can see that the number of families that have benefited from this has gone from about 100 to about 1,200 families statewide. And that's a really big deal because these are funds that can be used at a local level to help keep kids in their homes. So people are using these for all different kinds of things. It could be intensive case management. It could be a very specific housing intervention, paying for rent for a few months so that there's housing stability. It could be paying for a safe adult to be in the home between 3 and 7 to make sure that kids get home, they get their homework done, and they get a bath and dinner in bed. So it could be all different kinds of things, but what we're hearing is that this is really the game changer, and this is an area as a department that we just want to keep expanding because we hear time and time again from counties that if they had more access to this type of funding, they would be able to keep more kids in home as a very direct impact. And this funding is available to counties and tribes. And at this point, we have 65 jurisdictions that are participating. Next slide, please. So we have a few different efforts that we are using to try to continue this momentum. And the first one, if you go to the next slide, is really looking at our home visiting program. And for those of you who are familiar with the home visiting program, it's a 2-generational approach to trying to really offer some supportive services and supports to new parents. It's really targeted at that 0 to 5 age group, which at the beginning we talked about is the group that's most likely to be removed when there's a safety issue. So under the new federal law, there's a requirement that we use some funding towards evidence-based practices. Home visiting is an evidence-based practice. And so the challenge that we have is that the federal match won't work very well for us because most of our home visiting is funded with federal funds. But the good news is that we have the infrastructure here in state. We have, as you can see by the chart, we've got home visiting programs across much of the state. And what we're trying to do is leverage that infrastructure and at the same time really work to understand in what scenarios is home visiting the thing that families need who are involved in child welfare? So we know that our home visiting program is very, very successful statewide. It's an evidence-based practice, and it is not the thing that every child welfare family will need. But some child welfare families could use that. And so that's what we're trying to figure out. We're doing some research with
Good.
Wisconsin.
Hey, can you hold on 1 second? That's Katie. Hey, just hold on 1 second.
And can I just ask people to check their mute buttons and make sure that if you're taking a call, you're on mute. Thank you.
So the next innovation that we wanted to highlight is a childcare pilot for vulnerable populations. So, this is really a collaboration between our early childcare division and DHS, thinking about streamlining access for families with vulnerable populations to that childcare. And so just to elevate that scenario, I want you all to think about what it would take to keep a child safely with their parents. And one of the things that can really be a game changer is having a safe and accessible place for that child to go during the day while mom or dad is working on the things that they need to work on to improve their protective factors, to improve their safety for their own child. And so if you imagine a parent who has a need for some sort of treatment, maybe a mental health treatment or something like that, having that break during the day, having that time to really focus on the skill building that they need to be a safe parent is very, very critical. And it's critical for the child because then the child has that continuity, they have that really key learning and development. And so when we started brainstorming and thinking, you know, I don't know, 3 years ago about what would be one of the things that we could do as a department to really envision success for families in terms of keeping their kids at home. Childcare was one of the things that came to the very front, just because of how much of a game changer it can be for these families. So, you know, what we're really hoping is to create a bridge to the Wisconsin Shares program for some families for whom that might be more difficult right now. And really hoping that this works out. We would love to pilot this and see whether this is actually something that that makes that difference. And if it does, it feels like a really great approach, both for the kids, knowing all the benefits of early childhood, and then also for the families to give them that space. Next slide, please. The second that is very exciting, a new burgeoning partnership with Casey Family Programs. This is one of our, it's a very large funder and research group in child welfare nationally, and we have been working to try to get additional investments here in Wisconsin. And one of the things that we've been looking at is really the linkage between unstable housing and child welfare. And so this one's a little bit of a challenge because kids are not supposed to be removed from their families because of poverty. That's right in the statute. And also, if you're a child welfare worker and you have a family that's homeless and it is -13 like it was yesterday here, you do have a legitimate child safety issue in front of you. These things are really complicated. And so one of the things that has been researched lately, which is sort of under that theme of research that we kind of knew, but somebody had to go out and research it, is that when families have stable housing, there's less stress and there's less likelihood that the child is going to be removed because they have housing. So we've been working on how could we bring more of that to Wisconsin. I should say that we have some counties that are really leading the way in this realm, which is super exciting, and just trying to expand that here. So we're working with Casey Family Programs. Next slide, please. From a data perspective, we can also just show, which is kind of amazing, that the removals due to inadequate housing are actually like mirroring almost exactly the eviction moratorium. And so this is just one of those things, for those of you who are data people, you take two completely disparate things and you pull them together and you see, oh yeah, that makes sense. So to the extent that families were not being evicted was the extent to which kids were not being removed due to inadequate housing. Next slide, please. So just to wrap it up, I wanted to give a couple of examples of why this work really matters. So here's a 2-generation story that I wanted to share with you. And this was from a worker sort of giving from their perspective. So I met a youth who transferred to Dane County and caught wind of her staying at a women's shelter with her son in Madison. We worked together for a few months to get her a housing voucher, and she moved into her first apartment. She was just starting out in the workforce and was struggling to maintain a job as a single mother and recently fell behind on her rent. We were able to use stimulus funding to catch up on her rental payments, and now she was eligible for funding for her independent living program up to age 23. And so we think about those concrete supports and safety nets that we can provide families. You know, here we're talking about another initiative that the department put forward to really help older youth who are aging out of foster care have that assistance to be able to bridge that moment between when you leave the system and you don't have a safety net. And this funding was able to stabilize that person's housing. And the reason why it matters for this group is because she has a child. And so we want to make sure that those young parents and that, of course, our young people are transitioning to adulthood safely, but also those kids. Next slide, please. And then I also just wanted to highlight one little pocket of innovation, and it's always unfair to just single out a single county, but Jefferson County is really doing a great job here. So they've done 2 housing pilots. They rent a 4-unit building right now that they can use flexibly for families that are involved in child welfare to keep families together. They sublease it to their clients, and they also own a home downtown that can be used for emergency needs. And so here you can see that like they can relocate a whole family to this home in case of an emergency to keep the family together. And, you know, these are just a couple of examples of the types of ways that we are trying to transform the child welfare system and really trying to think differently about the family separation aspect in particular. So thinking about keeping kids with their parents, and if the real root issue is that a child doesn't have a safe place to go during the day, let's try to figure out that bridge to childcare. If the root issue is that the family is experiencing homelessness, let's try to deal with that as opposed to creating that child welfare removal. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop here and say thank you. Hopefully this hit on a few things that are interesting to the group, and I will turn it over to you, Secretary Amundsen.
Thanks so much, Wendy. That's such important data, and I think shifting into that impact mindset, it helps put a point on, you know, what is our goal, what is our North Star, and what are we looking for in terms of success metrics. Just curious if anybody has any questions for Wendy or comments from Wendy on again, kind of broadening the circle just a little bit to think about serving children and families in a different way. Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, Wendy, and thanks for sharing the heartbreaking news too. Appreciate that. Okay, so with our last little segment here, I would love to pivot us into, so we've been celebrating successes today. We had a lot of successes in 2021 around supporting kids and families. And I think we've been painting a little bit of a picture of some of the great new ideas we have in store for 2022. But I want to really open us up to sort of a broad conversation about how we can leverage the capacity of this group in 2022. And so in that theme of thinking about impact, thinking about who do you want to talk to in 2022? What dots would you like to see connected? What are the missing pieces that you haven't heard anything about in a LISI meeting? We're almost 2 years into this group convening. You know, what topics aren't we covering here that you think we ought to be looking at? And or what shared learning experiences do you think would be important for this group to have to reflect on? Because I think so many times when we learn together, we have those touchstone experiences that help to propel us into the kind of idea making that lend themselves to the Workforce Innovation Grant Program or the Dream Up concepts. So just to paint that picture a little bit, I want to tell you what some of us were doing last night on a very, very cold evening. Luckily, it was a virtual visit, so we could be cozy and comfortable. But want to give appreciation to Office of Children's Mental Health Director Linda Hall for organizing a virtual visit to Goodman Community Center in Madison for me and First Lady Evers and Superintendent Underly, Secretary Karen Timberlake. It was just a wonderful visit. For those of you that don't know, Goodman Community Center is just an invaluable community resource. As they say, they serve kids and families ages 3 to 103. So just like a wonderful community organization. And I think the highlight, and I won't speak for my colleagues, but I do believe we were all very moved and impressed by a youth panel who talked about how this organization was able to make them feel safe, supported, comfortable, able to take risks. And it was so powerful. It was so moving to hear, when we asked that question about social connectedness, when we asked that question about, how do you build that kind of support network in a community, hearing directly from them was just so profoundly powerful, and really underscores the need for that lived experience, the voices of lived experiences. So having had that learning experience together, our conversation went all different kinds of ways, and I could see all the wheels turning ringing in all of our heads and in our line of questioning. We also just had a wonderful experience meeting a brand new executive director, brand new leader in Madison, and making those connections. So that's to sort of tee up this question for the group today in our last 10, 15 minutes. What do you want to know? What do you want to see? Who do you want to talk to? What's the next place that we should lead this group in terms of solving through some of our most difficult issues around kids and families? Where do folks want to take this? So I just kind of want to throw it wide open and ask, what impact would you like to have in 2022 around kids and families? What do you want to know or see?
I'll just throw something out there, which would be with the innovation grants that you're doing in the childcare space, would be a follow-up, maybe a case study to share, like, what their model is, how it's working, any metrics, and how it's replicable in other communities. So just kind of continue to follow that that trajectory of how these are working.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I think that'll be really, really helpful. Jill.
Thank you so much. Very good presentations and just everything overall. Kudos to your team at DCF, Secretary. One of the questions that I had actually was during Wendy's presentation about how can we message better? Because I know the research is out there that when we invest in childcare, we are actually lifting women out of poverty. And when we do that, of course, we're lifting families out. But really, this is it's an imperative, I suppose, if we ever want, and you look especially in rural areas where poverty is prevalent, and more so, I think, than in urban areas, because there's also childcare deserts. So I know that there's the connection. And I just wonder, with the research that exists, or even the data that we have, how we can message that it's really an imperative, for women's and women's health too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill. I love that line of thought because I know that there are some nonprofit firms out there that have done some real like targeted, where you put a bunch of people in a room and you see what resonates with them, like that kind of studied work around what resonates in that childcare space from a messaging perspective. And then, in that broader space, I think it could be interesting to bring some experts to the table who have a lot of research and data behind the kinds of messages that matter. So I could really see that being a fertile topic. Thanks so much. Linda and then Peter. Linda, what do you got?
Well, I just want to say I like all of the above, everything that Kathy and Jill said, because we're thinking about, as we talk about social connectedness, we want to encourage people to be more engaged around that issue, but we also want to raise up what's going well, which was part of the impetus behind going to see the folks at the Goodman Center. So I'd really like to learn from what you all have done already in the past year or so with business and other communities. What are effective ways to raise that conversation? And the issue about poverty is just essential. I think we know that we know all the things that Wendy talked about, but we also know that the CDC says that when kids are pulled out of poverty, they have fewer behavioral issues. So it's a mental health issue to us too. And so how can we keep the conversation around that going and get some ongoing support for families?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Awesome. Peter. Uh-oh. Did we lose him? He could have gotten excited and hit the, no, I still see him on there. Give him a second here. All right, we'll loop back around to Peter in a second. Is there any other burning thoughts? I actually, I had one for Peter. I would really like, I don't know how many of you saw this earlier this week in the New York Times. They were publishing some research that showed the impact that infant and toddler brain development had on direct cash payments to families, to mothers. And so in cases, I mean, just to be able to do that kind of work to show a correlation, you know, that kind of sort of almost not intuitive correlation between, you know, the financial stability of a mother and the impact on brain development. And it just shows how toxic that stress can be for a family that is struggling to make ends meet. So to that end, I'm really interested in anything DOR knows or learns about child tax credits, about anything that we've seen as a result of the federal increase, anything we know about our state investment in child tax credits. I'm just really interested and don't know a lot about it. So that might be something to follow up with DOR and others for a future LISI conversation. Missy, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Emily. You know, I think one thing I feel is missing is something you and I have talked about a lot, which is getting the businesses to the table and understanding, you know, helping them to understand the challenges of the childcare business model and the challenges that parents face in needing childcare in order to show up at work. So we're going on the road, Emily, but I think it would be great, you know, if we think about who else can help us deliver this message and when those conversations, you know, what's the crisp message to businesses and who else can help deliver that. So I would love to see us really dive into that in 2022.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that, Missy. Yes, I feel like that's every time I talk to a reporter, I get that question of like, who can I talk to in the business community? And I've got 2 or 3, you know, my go-to folks. And beyond that, I feel like I need to grow that table. Actually, by the way, plug, if anybody hasn't seen it, and we can send this out afterwards, Capital Times did an absolutely amazing cover story about the complexities of childcare. They look at it from provider perspective, from parent perspective. My adorable dog Sugar is featured in the article as well. So you can check her out. Oh, and my daughter too, I forgot. But it just a lovely piece. And so to Missy's point of like, if you're looking for a crisp, I mean, it's 5 pages long. It's a long read, but if you're looking for a primer on why this industry is so difficult, it's a wonderful piece. So we'll make sure you guys get that as well. Peter, I see you back connected here.
Yeah, sorry about that. It displayed my technology challenges at times. It asked me to add a participant. I was in a loop I couldn't get out of. But thank you. And actually, it's good I went after Missy because I really think Missy's onto something. I think it is very helpful. One thought I have on Missy's point is it might be helpful for our comms directors to talk a little bit. You know, we're always going out and meeting with the business community and taxpayer groups, and we do these web roundtables, and we certainly, you know, I mentioned childcare as a key issue as it ties to workforce, as it ties to healthy communities, but I'm sure there's more we could add to that conversation. So that's one thing I would suggest. The other point I was going to bring up, part of the reason why this, you know, this whole topic interests me so much is I know in my former legislative district, these issues all bubbled up, and I just want to congratulate you, Secretary Amundson, your team. I think you've addressed so many of these issues in such an effective way. One issue that, you know, I bring up often because of my close ties with people in the disability community, and I know the challenges that they have with funding, and I know, you know, rising tide lifts all boats to a certain degree, and I know what you've done will have an impact. But I wonder, and I apologize if I about halfway through I had to cut out for about 20 minutes. We got a bill that we have some amendments on that we're chasing today. But I just wanted to know where we're at in terms of some special initiatives regarding so many of these nonprofits, because it's almost always nonprofits that serve people with disabilities because of the cost and the challenges. And So I just wondered if you covered it, then let it go. But if you didn't really go into detail, I'd like to know more about that. I've been very close with that community and work closely with like every Child Matters in Kenosha that's connected to the Gateway campus. And in Racine, we have a very important child care center there too. So I just wonder where we're at with that.
Yeah, that's a great topic, and one that I think we've been spending a lot of time in the last month because of some, frankly, some interest from our friends over at the Joint Finance Committee on trying to. There are some identified holes across the state of Wisconsin when it comes to connecting families with young children who are being served through disability programming, but connecting them with all of the tools in our toolbox. And I think to your point, sometimes it's childcare centers, but sometimes it's childcare centers plus programs run through DPI, plus programs run through DHS, plus programs run through children and families. And, if I was an autism counselor when I was in college, and I'll never forget working with a young, they must have been 23 or 24-year-old parents, 2 kiddos under the age of 4 with autism, and just drinking through the fire hose, trying to find the resources and the connections that they needed. And I remember them feeling like they were being helped to death and simultaneously like nothing fit the needs that they had. So both of those experiences happening simultaneously. And really, I think that's like a wonderful issue for this group to chew on a little bit of like, what is out there and how do we do a better job of making the universe a little bit more accessible for folks that are needing to access our services. Thanks, Peter. That's great. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add? All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody's interest and your wonderful inquisitive minds. You guys are the best colleagues. I'm just so grateful for us to be able to lean in on these topics. I want to say before our next meeting in April, we intend to get a brief survey out to continue to sort of build on this conversation we've been having at the end of how do we sequence and order the rest of our opportunities to see each other throughout the rest of the year. We want to make sure that this group, again, is not just a DCF roadshow, but something that is truly collaborative and something that can really seek to bridge the interest areas of all of us when it relates to kids and families. So we'll be doing a little bit of work around that before our next meeting. And one particular passion area of mine, I do a lot of work nationally thinking about this concept of children's cabinets. And I believe that LISI is a really functioning model. And I think that this last year has really given us some impact data to prove that while we're not an official children's cabinet, we are a group of folks from across this administration that have come together to make a real impact on bridging gaps between our agencies as it relates to kids and families. And so I really intend to tap in over this next year to more peer groups, more states that are really leaning into that concept of how do we bring agencies together in service to kids and families. So that's another sort of lens that I might continue to sort of apply to this group as we move forward. As always reach out to me with ideas, keep peppering me with your contacts, and very appreciative of all of you. We will do a cleanup email with a few of these slides and things that we referenced during the meeting. And thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and looking forward to seeing some of you in a few minutes. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.